Directory websites have been really popular all throughout 2025. I myself have made quite a few, some of which have done really well and some of which never really took off. But we've been seeing a lot of changes in terms of, Google organic results, AI mode, things like that. So I've been getting a lot of questions of people wanting to know, are directory sites still viable in 2026? Are they still a good thing to start? Can you actually still make money with them? I'm going to tell you what I think about that as we look at some stats, go over what I think it's going to take to succeed with the directory site in 2026. So the first thing I wanted to touch on is this article that I found on a business directory website. What is most interesting in this article to me is these industry benchmarks that they're talking about based on data that they have, what they've seen for 2025. And so they're kind of using that, to make projections for 2026. I think that a lot of people who are, making, directory websites, as a way to earn passive income these days, we're going niche, right? Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be professional, because, I've seen people making websites on things like hot springs, for instance, hot springs locations, things like that. But it definitely is niche. So I do think that the click-through rate here for niche professional is probably pretty similar for the niche, general, niche down directory sites, if not higher, honestly, because I feel like we probably have a lot more people searching for things like hot springs near them than we do, maybe, I don't know, a plumber, near them or something like that. But, if maybe someone is doing a directory site, with kind of like a rank and rent type of focus where they want to sell the leads to someone, that's going to fall under maybe the local services type of directory here. You can see that they're showing a pretty good click-through rate for that too. Now, of course, all of this, data here on click-through rates is great, except for one thing. We have seen a lot of changes, in terms of the organic results in Google, how they're being displayed, things like that. So I do want to point you to this recent post here that Matt Diggity did. If you're not familiar with him, he's very well known in the niche website and affiliate marketing space. He seems to do a lot of research in terms of, what's really going on in Google. And he actually mentions that search behavior has actually changed like by an insane amount here in the last 18 months. So you can't be building, websites, including directory websites like you were, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, things like that. He mentions multi-platform being the new search reality. Specifically things like ChatGPT for answers. I did see a recent article talking about how the age group, I believe it was 18 to 25, it may have been 18 to 35, I can't find the article that I read, but it was saying that age group tends to do all of their searches in ChatGPT instead of using a search engine. So that's something to think about in terms of who is your target market for the directory website that you are building. If it is that age group, you need to be thinking about how am I going to optimize to make sure I show up in ChatGPT, and that gets into that arena of AI SEO, right? And making sure that you can optimize for LLMs and things like that. He goes on to mention, basically, AI hallucinations are killing things for website owners in terms of getting cited in these LLMs. Listicles are working the best for that. I don't know if that would be true, though, for, a typical directory website. But it is something to think about in terms of, how are we going to show up in ChatGPT? How are we going to show up in, in Gemini and Claude and Perplexity and things like that? Mentions also auto dubbing in YouTube. Honestly, I think YouTube needs to be a part of a growth plan for any directory website that you are making because it is being cited quite heavily, in certain industries, in these AI answers, AI overviews, and these LLMs. He mentions also identity-based targeting coming to search. I don't know if that's really going to have a big impact on directory websites, but it may. Who knows? So those are the things that we need to be thinking about as we're thinking, am I going to make directory sites in 2026? And if yes, how am I going to overcome all of these changes? And, there's undoubtedly going to be more changes. And I did mention AI SEO, and I do think that is going to be a part of it. But I don't think it will work for every type of directory website. I also came across this article. I think it's an SEO agency website on how to basically make a make a directory website that's niched down and make it profitable, right? And they're mentioning that basically, directories are thriving right now. They've been thriving all year. They are expecting them to continue to thrive in 2026. I do agree with that, but I do think it's going to be a bit more difficult in terms of basically not only getting, visibility, but keeping that visibility, making sure people can actually find your website. And a lot of that, like I said, is because of AI. I think one of the reasons why directories are doing so well, have done so well, and will continue to do so well is what is mentioned right here, which is, that most of us who are making directory websites, we're doing our own research. We're digging deep. We're getting data that isn't, it does exist on the internet, obviously, because we are finding it, but it's not presented in a way that people can basically access it easily. And if people can't find it easily, the AI scrapers, for ChatGPT and things like that, they also can't find it easily. Of course, there is the, line of thought of, well, if we curate all this data and present it in an easy to read format, then the AI scrapers can, easily scrape it, right? So that is something that I think we do need to keep in the back of our mind. So what that means is we need something about our directories basically to keep people on them, right? If someone, find our directory through, ChatGPT, if they click through to the site, what is it about our directory website that makes them want to hang around? And that's going to be something that you might not be able to answer for every directory website, right? And if you can't answer that, then that means you probably don't have, an idea for a directory website that is future-proof. Let's see if we have anything else interesting in this article. I don't believe there was, but I do want to make sure real quick. He does, give you guys some niche ideas for directory websites. If basically if you are looking for ideas. There's also some great information in this article on basically growing and monetizing your directory site. So feel free to look for this article on your own. One thing I do think that we need to think about in terms of, starting new directory sites in 2026, or taking directory sites that we have, already started, that maybe you're already getting traffic, making some money. We need to be thinking about what are we going to do to make sure that these sites not only continue to get traffic, but get more traffic and make more revenue and get that kind of staying power, right? So I think this is where people are going to start, basically needing to look for new ways to get traffic, right? Just, natural extensions of your directory website. Does it make sense for you to have a YouTube channel for your website? Does it make sense for you to have a Facebook page for your directory website? Does it make sense for you to have a podcast for your directory website? Does it make sense for you to have a Pinterest account or a TikTok account? Things like that. These are things that are going to be useful in terms of driving traffic to your site. They're also going to build brand awareness, which is going to help you, in the end, in those organic rankings, because if people are searching for you as a brand entity, then that's going to naturally help you rank well in the search results. So these are the things that I think we need to think about going forward. If I was starting a new directory website, today, what I would do is I would sit down and I would say to myself, okay, I've got this idea. What can I do with it other than make the directory website? And I do that anyway when I'm trying to think of how I can monetize a site. But what I think going forward, it needs to be the case for everyone is, how else can I get traffic? If AI mode in Google totally kills my traffic, how else can people find me? How else can I get eyeballs on my directory site? And like I said, for some directory sites, that may very well be YouTube, right? For some, it may be a podcast. For some, it may be, having Pinterest stuff, right? Let's say you have a directory website that has something to do with food, right? So maybe I don't know, I live in Vegas and people are always looking, for buffets because there's not as many buffets in Vegas as there used to be. So let's say you have a directory site focused on finding restaurants that have buffets. Maybe you also, I don't know, have a blog on that site that has recipes that are basically copycat recipes, right? If there's some famous dish that's made at a popular buffet, people want to make it at home, you have the recipes, then, you can use the recipes. Do very well on Pinterest, they do very well on Facebook. Sometimes they do well on YouTube as well. These are all ways you can get eyeballs on your site. Someone sees something they want to make and, they get to your site, your directory site, they're like, oh, well, this recipe that I'm going to make comes from, XYZ famous buffet. I should see, if there's anything like that near me or something like that, right? So I feel like there are ways that we can basically think about how we're going to get the traffic to our sites that are going to mean that we can, basically stay relevant, in this new climate where the AI changes to the way not only that we're getting visibility, but the way that people are finding information. It's constantly changing. We need to be thinking about how it might change in the future, how we're going to adapt to that, how we're going to prepare in advance for when that happens. And like I said, I do think that having this multi-prong approach in terms of how people are finding us, it's basically that be everywhere type of mentality. If you can be everywhere, then you can be found, right? And I think if you don't want to put in the work to do that, then directory websites aren't going to be viable for you. I also think that we're not going to have as wide of an opportunity landscape in terms of you can't just make a directory website on anything anymore because it's getting harder to get discovered, right? So if you have an idea and it doesn't really work for Pinterest or Facebook or YouTube or a podcast or anything else, it has to rely on organic search, and it's probably not going to be a viable idea. And I did mention AI SEO earlier. I do think that is something that we're also going to have to work on. I run an SEO agency, so I have clients where I've done, AI SEO stuff for them, helping them show up, in Perplexity, ChatGPT, and so on. The problem I feel like, though, with doing AI SEO for directory websites is the way that people search for the information. I don't know how we can ensure that if we show up in ChatGPT, for instance, that they're also going to click through to our website. So that's something that we're going to have to figure out, I feel like, as we go along. And like I said, it's really going to be a matter of figuring out how people are searching for whatever topic it is that your directory website is about, so that you can think, okay, so if they were searching for this in ChatGPT, what would they be entering? Then enter that in ChatGPT, right? See what comes up and then try to work backwards from there. Like, how can I get my site to show up in these results? And then what can I do to make sure that when it does come up, people still, come to my website? And honestly, that is a lot of what, is involved in AI SEO. It's seeing what is being cited, by these LLMs, and then kind of reverse engineering that so that you can make sure that you're showing up, your website is showing up. So basically, I said all that to basically say, I do think directory websites are still a viable way to make money in 2026. But, I'm not going to lie, it is going to be more difficult. I think you are going to have to put in more effort, but I think you can make as much, if not more money than ever, simply by going that extra mile, doing all those things, and simply being everywhere. If you have some thoughts on it, I would love to hear them. Go ahead and drop those in the comments. Let me know what you're thinking, where you're at with it. And if you have any other ideas that maybe I haven't shared here, I would love to hear those as well. Thanks for watching.